Got the first one standing up on a grass-fed eddy. I'm actually out here with my buddy Jake, and he's exploring elsewhere right now, but I'm gonna catch up with him. He has prepared a number of interview questions where he kind of wants to pick my brain a little bit on my 20 plus years fishing this river for smallmouth. Maybe sort of a long-term perspective on this fishery, the Susquehanna Smallmouth Fishery. So Jake's here with me. You got a couple interview questions. We're gonna take a minute while we fish this eddy and go over.
All right, so Jeff, what times of the year or what seasons do you find that a river eddy, mainly a large one, is the most productive?
The larger eddies are most productive?
Yeah.
Well, what do they need? Why do they need to be out of the current?
High water's an obvious one.
Yeah.
Take the high water aspect out of it.
The dead center of the eddy is where they spawn. And if you're gonna leave them alone when they spawn, you should be fishing things in current. You know, fish the current seams, throw the spinnerbait at the edge. Don't throw the soft plastic in the center because you're putting it on the bed. We're finding that this time of year, the eddies are really important because we were talking about earlier about the flathead catfish are pushing them out of the deep winter holes. The winter holes typically aren't just an eddy, you know. In the springtime, they will pull up into eddies and use that as as a place to move from spot to spot to get to where they need to go to spawn and to eat as things warm up. But in the winter, it seems like it's important because the flathead catfish are pushing them out of the big, huge, deep, river-wide places that they usually go. Fort Hunter, go to Fort Hunter. It's full of catfish. It's hard to find, good concentrations of smallmouth, whereas that used to be the quintessential, Susquehanna River winter hole. It seemed odd to me because I haven't been fishing the winter, in the winter on this river as much in the last few seasons, but I kept driving past them like, why do I not see like 30 boats out there on Thanksgiving weekend Saturday? It's because they moved out. Catfish moved in and smallmouth moved out. I mean, there's still some out, but it's not like you can sit in one spot and catch, be within a cast of 300 fish. It's changed. So the eddies, the grass-bed eddies in winter are becoming really important. The ledge eddies in winter are becoming really important. So pulling up into grass beds like this and using the grass bed to get yourself stopped has become such an important part of my winter fishing anymore. They are getting in these smaller grass bed formed eddies. Normally, it used to be that they would only hang out in really deep, wide, super slow moving, big areas of slow moving current or no current. Now they're kind of picking smaller spots to inhabit. These grass beds are a perfect example of that. Getting stopped in one like this is, just an easier way to get stopped compared to dropping both anchors and getting locked on. But certainly in spring, the eddies are very important. And then as it cools down in the fall, your current seams in the eddies. And I want to talk about breaking them down though a little bit, because it's not just plunk it right in the middle. I mean, you need to study the currents and look at the foam, the foam bubbles and how they travel across the surface to really figure it out. The most overlooked part of an eddy is the pinch off. Here's the thing that creates the eddy, called a grass bed or ledge rock or a point off of a shoreline. You have your current seam coming down, you have kind of swirly water here, and you have dead water here, and today we're fishing right up at that point, and that's where we've gotten a couple bites and caught some fish. But the most overlooked part is as you get down towards the end and it comes to a point, that part is what most anglers overlook. And on pressured water, that's where they go. Absolutely been seeing this everywhere I go. Look at the scale pattern. What do you see? I see a bite mark. Scales removed in an arch formation right there. Same thing on the other side. This fish was flathead catfish are trying to eat them. I see it a lot.
You kind of talked a little bit about it. I'm going to skip the questions to number 3. Over the years that you've fished the Susquehanna, what major changes have you witnessed in terms of the overall health of the fishery and what the average person can do to help the fishery out?
I think I first fished the Susquehanna in 99 or 2000. It was a Potomac River Smallmouth Club trip, and it was I think I fished on a jet boat out of City Island, and we fished all those pilings, and it was a weekend long thing, and we also went up to Riverfront Campground and fished, the ledges straight out from there and down, and back then, maybe it was my fishing abilities. It probably was, but I don't remember catching nearly the number of 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 inch fish that we had in 2012, 13, 14, 15, for sure. 2015 was an amazing year for big fish. 16, 17, it kind of went down a bunch. I don't know. I think those fish got to end of life cycle, but somewhere in there, somewhere in that period of time, I actually did a kayak fishing tournament that benefited the Susquehanna River Keeper. Raised, a little bit of money for it, but that's the thing. What was more important is to get anglers to know who the River Keeper was. And to know how to get in touch with the river keeper, and that's the thing that the average angler can really do is to go to waterkeeper.org. So look up who your waterkeeper is. That's something that, having the knowledge or of how to get in touch with that person who really represents the river in court if need be. They will sue people. That's one of the requirements of being a river keeper, is that you sue entities that are polluting the river, and violating the Clean Air and Water Act.
That could be municipalities or boroughs or cities or anything, right?
It's been everything.
Yeah.
I know Jeff Kelby did a good bit of that, and it's not the first thing you go to. It's a last resort, and the best work that a river keeper does is working with different entities that interact with the river. And I know he did a lot of working with the agricultural community in the Shenandoah Valley, and had good effects. I mean, it's that fishery after a massive fish kill has rebounded quite a bit. Not nearly to what it's been, what it was in the past, but I think a lot of I'm going to come back to the other part of your question, how this fishery has changed, and I think it's in the middle of another change with the flathead catfish. But there is cycling of good spawns and bad spawns, and I feel like the strength that this fishery has in terms of its recruitment is it always has its tributaries. It's almost like a plan B that those fish run up into up into Sherman's, up into Conner-to-Gwinnett, up into any of the Penn's Creek, any of those larger Mahantango, and they spawn. And that's important because some years the river, the places like this, like there's a big eddy out in front of us where they might spawn, but if it's up and it's muddy all season long, is that your? Yeah.
If it's up and it's muddy all season long.
If it's up and it's muddy all spring long, you're not going to have a good spawn. You're not going to have good recruitment, but those tributaries will help. And it's, I think it's cycled in 2015, 16, we had so many top end fish, but we didn't have a lot of fish. And we've come back to a more even mixture, I think, of all sizes of fish. Back in 2001, 2002, when I was really cutting my teeth on this river, you could catch all the 11, 12, and 13-inch fish you want. I mean, just constantly. But to get it in front of an 18 or 19 was sort of an event, because there were so many other fish that were on that, that tube or Senko or whatever you threw out there before the 19 came across and found it. So, it does cycle in terms of the recruitment. I think what's happening now is that we're having a good rebound from low numbers that had some big fish, and it's the fishing is good right now, but we have threats. We have water quality threats for sure. Wastewater treatment plants that aren't up to par. There's a lot of things that you could debate, but I come up here and do what river cleanup I can, just on any day of fishing. But I've taken days to, with my son to haul a bunch of stuff out of here. There's a lot of garbage in this river. But the flathead catfish I keep coming to, because I think I was really affected by seeing that fish. I've seen a couple of them, but that one I caught earlier today was just like so obvious. Like, yeah, they are no longer, the smallmouth are no longer the top predator. I know the muskie have always been here, there's walleye around, but I mean, I think it's becoming a flathead river.
I think for a number of years the smallmouth were an apex predator due to amount of fish that were in the river.
Yep.
They were,
and I think they're being out competed on maybe we don't see as many crayfish. I mean, there's times where I've I've looked at this river and looked down, and you just get dizzy from the entire bottom of the river moving. It's just nothing but crayfish everywhere. I don't see that quite as much anymore. I think they're, the flatheads are gobbling up those too, out competing them. Oh, that was a nice heavy one. On the jerk. Look at that chunk. A little deformed, but he's round. See you later, round fish.
So, third question, and this one's kind of important for what we're doing right now, but can you explain passive action in a bait, and what kinds of baits have you found that fit this type of presentation?
Dead sticking. There's kind of two different types of actions that you can have. I'm going to get two lures that I got on today to kind of describe the two different passive action presentations. One is a finesse jig. The other is this jerk bait. And to dead stick a jerk bait, I have not taken this particular jerk bait off in 5 trips. I'm happy with it. Not because of the color or the action or anything else. I'm happy with it because when I put it in the water, it sinks about that rate. I can't even do it slow enough, but it does sink. And eventually, okay, we're gonna do the high speed. Whoop. All right, it ends up on the bottom like this. And catching myself, with the bill down like this, it'll sit just like that. And the smallmouth comes up onto it, and the rush of water coming off that fish makes this just kind of pivot a little bit. I'm not moving it. I'm doing my best to really just get a totally taut line on feeling whatever happens with that bait, which is hard. Like maintaining the right amount of tension to feel the bite, but not moving it forward and not having slack with a suspending jerk bait, the one that doesn't do like the jig where you get to feel that hard connection with the bottom. It's tough to do, but the jerk bait has that sort of pivot action like this. So does a Ned rig. Ned rig has no built-in action other than its pivot. So the pivot on the head with the dead stick is one part of it. The other part is with something like this, and the Laztec really helps it a lot. But this bat wings, and I've been hot on this. I'm doing really well with this finesse jig. But it could be a hair jig. It could be like the zipper drop shot worm that I've poured and put on a little 16th ounce football head. It has the pivot, but it also has the floating soft plastic claws just doing this stuff, this really subtle action. And it also has the short and long strand skirt material that it's also moving. So the concept is in a bait that is in constant motion but never going anywhere. That head rests in that spot and you're just letting it sit there, and it's just you try to make it stop. You can't. It's constantly moving. And baits that are good at that, if they're soft plastic, the Elastec does a lot to help with that. But really, really thin stuff. I got a hair jig here. I almost threw it in the water. that has that little soft plastic, they're almost like little tentacles, right? That wavering in the, in whatever current, even if you're putting it where there isn't current, this is, once it comes to rest, it's gonna keep moving, and it's thin, pliable, soft plastic little pieces, little tails that just, like the hair, like the strands on the silicone jig skirt. It has components that are always just constantly moving just a little bit, and that, when the fish comes up onto it, looks at it and says, yeah, that's about right, I'm gonna eat it. So that built-in action is critical. This looks promising. Rearrange it. Go by momentum. So we got some water trickling through on this side of it's really a grass bed on the side of an island. But there's some trickle through here. I'm more excited about this top corner of the eddy seam right there. It's probably going to be the deeper water, and it's the crisper eddy seam with totally dead water next to it. Good a spot that I have a fish in it. Right at the head of an island, nice grass bed pocket. Alright, hot fishy, good singular whack on, and he took it all the way on that finesse jig.
What would you consider to be the different seasons for a smallmouth bass in terms of talking about their yearly life cycle, reproductive cycle? Can you break them down on what they are and kind of when they occur?
I'd almost have to think about it and write down temperatures, but I guess I'm winging it. The winter season where, they're far from dormant. They're trying to put on weight if they can. But they're conserving energy because there isn't as much food out there, so they're doing as much energy conservation as possible. And the colder temperatures work in their favor in that manner. The water being cold means they don't burn up as much energy. As we start getting longer days, even without the water warming up, say we have an especially late spring, it doesn't matter. They're in pre-spawn, move to these areas where they know they need to do the deed. That late winter, early pre-spawn time is so much fun, because you can get them in great concentration in certain places, creek mouths, or even in, here I go going back to traditional winter holes. They move to the tops and the bottoms, and they get really active, and they need to eat. They know they got to eat. They're in training. They are bulking up because they know once they go on a bed and they defend it, it's a tremendous amount of energy expenditure for them to spawn, for them to fight off, any number of animals that are trying to get at their eggs or, their fry. Once they defend the fry for that week or so, that they stay with that little cloud of little black, the size of like a grain of rice, except it's just jet black, hence the name black bass. And then you move from the spawning period, and really when that happens is, I want to say it's debatable, because it shifts. You know, they can go on bed if it's a really early warm spring, and then something will happen where it'll cool off a lot, and they will pull right back out of there and abort. But there's also, you know, several cycles. Usually the biggest smallmouth go first. They choose the best spots where you have, you know, the most amount of protection from heavy flow at a variety of levels. You know, if the bottom drops out and it gets super low, they want a spot that still remains wet and defendable. But also, if the river comes way up, you know, there's a high bank or a big ledge rock or something nearby that can, you know, allow them to continue to defend that area. So it happens in different, you know, there are alpha spots for spawning. The first set of fish that go in there are the biggest, most dominant. You know, you get your 18s, really 19, 20, 21 inch, you know, your biggest fish get in there first. And then the second wave could be your 16, 17, 18. And, you know, I've seen little dinks running through the motions. It's like they got their spawning training wheels on, and they're out there in June sitting on beds. It's like, you're not really doing that. You know that's what you do. So what that does when you have several different, you know, sets of spawns, if the first one gets wiped out, maybe the second one gets through. If the first two get wiped out, the third one might get through, and that's the set of fish you get from that year. So it's putting your eggs in different baskets. Nature does that. And I mentioned it earlier. Nature does that with some fish that run up in tributaries and spawn, and some fish that stay out here in the main river and do it. But really, you know, when that ends, they're recovering. The post-spawn period, they're really, they can be tough to catch. And they haven't moved far from where they've spawned, but they're lethargic, and usually takes, you know, smaller baits and more finesse presentations to catch them. And I don't particularly enjoy fishing that time of year. I'd rather be down on the bay, you know, fishing for striped bass or snakehead or tidal largemouth. But, you know, man, May and early June, even into mid-June is I don't know, it's not great. March and April, yeah, it's a lot of fun. You know, you get into May and early June, that spawn and post-spawn is just less fun for me. And then you get into summer, and I love, you know, after 4th of July, they start getting their legs back under them and really start getting aggressive, and that's when it's really fun to get out here and just strain water. You know, find that upstream side of a grass bed and run the shallow diving, you know, subsurface crankbait through there. Topwater starts to come into play, although I will always say that topwater peaks in September for whatever reason. You know, you can get back into those power fishing presentations, throwing your jackhammer on the current seam. Spinnerbait fishing becomes pretty important, especially when the river comes up a little bit. You have those thunderstorms, those summertime thunderstorms that muddy up the water, and you get a mud line coming out of a creek, and throwing a spinnerbait across that is amazing. You get into fall, and then they get a little bit more aggressive, but it cycles. You'll have hot days, and you'll have days that are just so-so. On the days where it's on, it's fun because you connect with a 19-incher and know that, you know, there's at least 2, maybe 3, 4, 5 other fish that same size in that area. They group up and they wolf pack. And you know, you can do it with the dead stick and soft plastics like a fluke, or you can do it, you know, with swim baits or all kinds of things. There isn't a whole lot that won't work in September and early October. Early October is when I've caught my biggest one, and it was 6-pound 10-ounce that I caught in the river bassin tournament. I caught 2 others that day that I measured on the boga grip were over 5, and that's exceedingly rare to catch 3 fish over 5 pounds on an average year. I haven't caught a 5-pound smallmouth out of this river in a couple years. 4.5 is good. I weigh them. I actually weigh them. I don't guess. The true 5 is a rarity, and to get those in early October is a lot of fun. It's a good time to catch the big ones, especially when the river rises. And then you move into November. We just did this. It's a great time of year to really learn how to find wintering areas. The suspending jerkbait bite really takes off. And as it gets colder, you get more into the finesse jigs and the hair jigs. You get into December, and I don't want to say it slows down, but your presentation needs to slow down, because the things that they eat in 45 or 37 degree water, they're not moving at the same speed that subsurface crankbait in July ripped across the top of the grass bed. That just they smoke it. They know, hey, there's a crayfish, grab them. No, they don't move fast at all. They kind of hunker down and just like a sloth, like a little aquatic sloth. They're moving across the bottom, trying not to be noticed. So your presentations slow down as the water cools off, and then we're back to January, February, where they're trying to conserve energy. They will eat, especially on days where 3rd, 4th day of a warming trend. They have to eat, especially those bigger ones. But they stay out of current as much as possible. So that's the full cycle.